around in St. Louis City, but I'm concerned about where the crime is taking place. And specifically in our building, we're right in the central business district, right in the middle of it. And we're at Broadway and Pine. And I'm talking about crime that has spilled into that area. You know, people have said ever since the story broke, oh, every city has crime. New York's got crime. And I say, no, I'm from New York. And yes, there's crime. But
you don't sound like you're from New York.
But if three people got shot in Times Square, that would be treated very differently than if there's crime going on in other parts of the city where you've grown accustomed to it. If three businessmen got shot on Wall Street, it would be treated very, very differently. So it's not fair to look at St. Louis City as a whole. You have to look at what the crime has happened in the central business district. And in those areas, violent crime has been on the rise.
Is this because of people coming into the city of St. Louis? And I've heard the knock that these are bad guys coming in from Illinois who are coming in and doing bad things to people in St. Louis. Or is it just people in the city of St. Louis who don't have money, they don't have jobs, they don't have whatever, and that's why they're doing what they're doing?
Well, I think that crime anywhere is always the product of, a cycle of poverty and lack of opportunity and desperation that eventually leads people to crime. So and it would be great to get to all the root causes and solve them, but in the meantime, I think they have a real problem on their hand if they can't keep the central business district safe on a daily basis. And the reason I talk about the central business district is because, I share this for those who aren't aware, that the budget for the city doesn't just come from the tax dollars of the people that live in the city. 1/3, or about 30% of the city's budget, comes from something called the city earnings tax.
Right.
And that's taxes paid by people who work in the city, most of which don't live in the city.
1%.
Right. 1% of everything that's earned. Yeah. So you're talking about, just in our building alone, the people that work in there, it's probably close to $3 million. Now, that's not all from Brown and Crouppen, but there's a lot of firms in our building a year. So but these people don't get to vote for any of the races. They don't get to pick their alderman. They don't get to pick the mayor. It's what they would have called in the old days taxation without representation. And you know what? I'm fine with it as long as our needs aren't neglected by the city. All of the city earnings tax, the vast majority of it comes from the central business district. That's everything from, say, Busch Stadium to where the Dome is, going north and south. Yeah. And then east and west from the Arch to up about Scottrade. Think about the number of businesses there and how much money that generates for the city. That area needs to be kept as crime-free as possible. That's where they're putting all that money into the new Keener Plaza. And I feel like if they don't solve the crime issue down there, who's ever going to feel safe going there?
It's interesting. Having worked in downtown St. Louis for 22 years and paying that 1%, I always kind of figured it was part of the cost of doing business so that I have police protection, fire protection, that sort of thing. But at the same time, you go, well, what's my return on investment in this particular case? What's been the reaction from your folks when you're saying, we haven't made a decision, but we're thinking about?
Well, I'll be honest. I was very surprised as to how much support there was for exploring options outside the city. When we were in the Laclede Gas Building, and we were in there for 17 years, which is just a couple blocks up from where we are now, we signed the new lease about 6.5 years ago. And at the time, we explored what our best options were, staying downtown, moving out to the county. And overwhelmingly, everyone in the firm said, we want to stay downtown. We have a lot of employees who live in Illinois. We have a lot of people who do workers' compensation insurance. They wanted to be right next to the Wainwright building where the Division of Workers' Comp is. We wanted to be near the courts because we obviously do a lot of business in the courts. And everybody said, you know what, we've been downtown. We want to be downtown. This time around when the story broke, very, very different response from the staff. And here's the thing. You mentioned about crime rates. A lot of what makes a person uncomfortable in the city are not necessarily crimes that are actually committed. It is the way that people feel when they're doing basic things. I'll give you an example. Every day, a lot of our people park in our building, and they feel safe because they're in the building. But the building can't give us enough spots for all of our employees. Sure. So we have about 50 employees who park 2 blocks up in a different garage. That walk every night from our building to that garage is a mysterious, scary 2 blocks for our employees. And it's not because crimes are necessarily being perpetrated, but they're being made to feel uncomfortable. There are loitering people who are looking at our women lewdly, who are making, comments to them as they walk by, who maybe are asking for money, and maybe it's totally innocent and it's just a panhandler, but maybe, they worry, are they just trying to get me to pull out my wallet? So those are crimes that are not committed, but that's a daily feeling of discomfort amongst a lot of our staff.
Brown and Crouppen is not a small firm. It's a big firm.
Yes.
So what's been the reaction from the city of St. Louis when you even float the idea of saying, we're heavily having some problems here and we're thinking about moving out of town?
Well, we were actually, we didn't appreciate our own size when the story kind of broke. I didn't ever imagine it would garner the amount of attention that it did. But of course, the next day, Mayor Slay called Andy Crouppen and myself and set up a meeting to sit down with him and Chief of Police Dotson, which will happen next Tuesday.
Good.
And, he did voice to us, to his credit, he said, you guys are an important part of the city. We really appreciate having you here. You've been a mainstay for almost 40 years. We don't want to lose 200 professional jobs in the city. And, we want to talk to you about your concerns. So I'm encouraged that he reached out. We've also been contacted by, I think, all of the mayoral candidates in the Democratic primary. We're actually meeting with Bill Haas today. We met with Tashara Jones. We had a brief meeting with Lyda Crewson, and I think we're going to have a longer meeting with her next week. Antonio French as well next week. We've also been contacted by our local alderman and the state rep.
So in other words, they're concerned
They
that,
are.
that a couple of hundred people need to just be picking up and moving.
And I think that they are concerned, and rightfully concerned, that every exodus begins with a firm. And I think that there should be a real concern that there may be a business exodus out of downtown, because most businesses are down there by choice. It's not that we have to be down in downtown St. Louis because that's what necessarily serves our business well. It's not like we're a location of a restaurant where we want to feed the people right there. Our services, we can set up our headquarters pretty much anywhere we want to in the greater St. Louis area. It doesn't necessarily have to be downtown, and I think most other businesses are the same.
But for convenience purposes, we're talking about a law firm here. You have the city, you have the state, and you have the federal government, and they're all located centrally in the downtown. So it would behoove you to be better for your people to be there.
Absolutely. And it's a lot cheaper. I mean, you don't want to make it all about money, but there are tremendous economic benefits in having the firm located in downtown St. Louis versus, say, Clayton. I mean, if you talk about your cost per square foot for your lease, you're probably 30 to 50% higher in Clayton than you are downtown. So economically, it makes a lot more sense for us to be in downtown St. Louis, even with the city earnings tax. And we'd like to continue to be down there and reap the benefit of that savings.
Has the city expressed any interest in helping out financially to keep you and the firm there?
They haven't, but honestly, we have zero interest in that. We don't want the city's money. We want the city's money to pay for a safer city. Yeah. We don't need the money. We're not looking. We want to pay our taxes. We just want to make sure that some of those tax dollars, a fair allotment of them, are put towards securing that area, because it's no different than your household. The money generated that you have, you don't keep it in your kitchen drawer. You put your money in a bank. Why? It's safe. You put your valuables in a vault. You keep them safe because without that money, you can't do all of the other things that you want to be able to do. And my feeling is that the Central Business District in St. Louis, that is the economic wealth of the city. That's where you're drawing in outside money. How does the city can't survive on its own residents? It needs people from the county and beyond to come downtown and spend their money. They got to come to the Cardinal games. They got to come to the Blues games. They need to come to the conventions. They need to come to the restaurants. And, the only way that you're going to draw them into that area and businesses into that area is that absolute feeling of pure safety there, whatever that takes. Because when you have a situation where the fellow that was shot outside of Busch Stadium last year, how many people after that incident start questioning whether or not they feel comfortable coming down for a game? Sure, the Cardinals are always going to pack people, but are those same people going to stay late? Are they going to hang out at the bars and the restaurants the way that they would have? Or do little events like that start creeping into their mind?
What's been the reaction from your peers in the business world, not necessarily the legal world, but any other businesses that you and your associates have business with?
It's interesting. We had a tremendous response in phone calls and emails, and one pattern that I saw was for businesses downtown and for people who don't live downtown but used to come downtown a lot more. They applauded us drawing attention to this issue and shining a light on it and saying, you know what, if we're being honest with ourselves, we don't feel the same way walking in the streets of the downtown St. Louis that we used to feel. I've been working downtown 20 years, and I never questioned those few blocks going to a restaurant or going to a Culinaria or down to 6th and Washington to one of those restaurants. But there are so many abandoned buildings now. It's so desolate on some of those streets that even during the day when you walk 3 or 4 blocks, you say, where is everybody? Where are the people? Now, the people that live in downtown St. Louis, their reaction has been a little bit more negative on us coming out because, you know, they live down there and no one likes to hear their city spoken about in a way, true or not, that casts a negative light. And they've said, you know what, we like it down here. Don't talk bad about the city. You know, we feel fine. So for residents of the city, they felt a little bit different than the businesses.
Ed, thank you so much for coming by today. I appreciate your time and coming out here to join us here at KTRS in Clayton, of all places.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you having me. It's a beautiful studio.
Thanks so much. That is Ed Herman, managing partner at Brown & Crouppen Law Firm, joining us today. It is